Welcome to our March 28th Public Safety Funding Committee. I call the meeting to order. And Brian, will you help conduct the roll call, please?
Chair Lewis.
Here.
Jason Barron.
Present.
Barbara Broderick. Dan Butler. Marissa Calderon.
Here.
Heather Carter. Kimber Lanning. Don Noggle.
Here.
And Brian Tobin.
Here.
Brian, just to confirm, I think I see Heather and Kimber on the Zoom. Welcome. Good to have you here. And will the other two be joining at some point, or what's their status?
Barbara will be joining at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
And then Dan was unable to attend today.
Thank you. In our second meeting, we better, for two new members that were not here last time, give the two of you a moment just to introduce yourselves. And then we'll take, I know you saw the minutes and were able to see a little bit about the rest of us, but we could take maybe a 10, 15-second intro first. But Marisa, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Marisa Calderon.
And
Thank you. I'm Marisa Calderon, happy to be here with Chicanos por la Causa. I'm the Associate Director of Family Empowerment, overseeing our community and youth centers here in Phoenix Metro and statewide. And I'm a parent as well.
thank you. Heather? You might be on mute, or we're not hearing you yet. So Kimber, you're hearing Heather, is that right? Now we're not hearing either of you, so Heather, we're going to come back and let you do an introduction. And when I get the signal, we'll come back to them, but let's go back to Chief Brian. Let's just go this direction and give a quick introduction for those of us who were here last time.
Okay, sure. My name is Brian Tobin. I'm a resident in Phoenix. I'm the fire chief of the Daisy Mountain Fire District.
Dawn Noggle, and I'm a citizen. I'm retired, but I previously worked as the mental health director for correctional health services within the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
John Lewis, currently serving as the president and CEO of the PHX East Valley Partnership. Prior, had the great blessing to serve as the mayor of Gilbert from 2009 to 2016.
Jason Barron, I'm the Director of State Government Affairs for Salt River Project.
Thank you. And I'm just going to look towards Brian to see if we have any luck yet on whether we're able to hear. Should we try it again with Heather?
Sure.
Heather, let's try it again. Can you hear us okay? And I'm not hearing Heather yet. All right. As long as the two of you can hear us, we'll continue on, and at some point, we'll do an introduction. Brian, for the group, especially Heather and Marisa, they may not have met you yet. So who are you?
I am Brian Schmidt. I'm the Public Safety Funding Committee Director. I'm here to help you all execute your charge.
Thank you. And should we have Emily, executive session, do you want to, or do you want to do it now?
It's fine, I can do it.
Okay, please.
I'm Emily Kreger. I'm an attorney with the Burgess Law Group. I practiced at Maricopa County for about 10 years before, and in another firm before that. I'm here to assist the committee and in open session for purposes of open meeting law, and also to advise on any other legal issues that may come up through this process. Thanks.
Thank you. The first agenda item related to our minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes for last meeting.
Second.
With that motion and second, All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The second agenda item, Brian, I might just turn to you. In our last meeting, we said it would be good to have a vice chair and possibly a second vice chair, possibly if I lose my voice or if I'm not here. And so we opened it up for individuals to contact you if they had an interest. And what feedback do you have?
So there were a couple people who threw their hat in the ring or volunteered to serve as vice chair. I think we also had a discussion on what you thought the executive committee might look like. But I don't want to speak.
Would you like me to speak? So this is my understanding for the 7 of us with 2 more that will get this update, that the first to volunteer was Jason. Thank you, Jason. The second to volunteer was Brian. Thank you, Brian. And so this is where I look for some advice to Emily and some guidance from Brian, that would be wonderful. And I guess we go potentially, this is discussion. And so I'm giving you updates and then we can get your feedback, that possibly we could just go in the order of when the volunteerism came. And so Jason, that could put you as the first vice chair, Brian as second vice chair. And I made a comment to Brian and Emily that it might be nice, because we have some wonderful leaders that are also female, that maybe we have a first vice chair, a second vice chair that we volunteer one of you for, and then Brian could be a third vice chair. That would put us in potentially what we would call an executive committee, which 4 would work, and we just have to be careful that what would an executive committee do, possibly if there's discussion about an administrative item, that's a possibility that would be still under the guidelines of the open meeting law. The other thought would be that we just go with the 2 volunteers, or a third thought could be that, Brian, we put you on reserve and look for one of our female leaders to be a second vice chair. So that's the discussion that occurred. Let me continue the open comments any of you might have on that. Brian?
Mr. Chair, at your discretion, I would be more than happy to wait and be put in the dugout or in the on-deck circle if that makes this process move smoother. If you need a replacement, I'd be more than happy to do so.
Thank you. Any other comments? And Heather and Kimber, I think we're still not quite hearing you, but we know you're there and you're hearing us. Let me ask the 2 of you, did you have any comments you wanted to make on what I just shared? So Kimber, are you up on the thumbs up with what Brian just said?
Can we ask her to type her comments in case she's volunteering to be a vice chair?
The answer is yes. There's Barb. Oh, you know, Dawn, I just saw Barb go like this, and that could mean at an auction that she just volunteered to buy something. Or to be a
vice chair.
vice chair. Let me start with Jason. Jason, as a potential vice chair, do you have any comments on those options that I shared?
Mr. Chairman, I think they're all very good options, and we'll serve in whatever capacity you want. But if you have other more qualified volunteers, I would cede the floor.
Okay, thank you. And to our legal counsel, I understand that if we just did vice chair and first vice chair, maybe you'd call it second vice chair, we could act on that today. But if we did any variation of that, we would need to put it on the agenda for next meeting.
That's correct. It was just how it was agendized. So it was agendized just to vote on a chair, or chair and a second vice chair. No, a first vice chair and a second vice chair.
Okay.
And also, I think since they're having to type their comments, we should read them for
Yes.
purposes of
Okay.
the meeting.
And I'm not in front of a computer, so Brian, are you able to see if we have any typed comments?
Yes. Mr. Chair. Kimber Lanning wrote, I think we need to prioritize diversity. I appreciate your focus on gender diversity, but also perhaps we need more racial diversity on the board. Heather Carter said, I second what Kimber said. And Barbara said, I would be willing.
Okay. I'm going to make a proposal, not a motion, but just with that feedback and with Brian's comment for today, because it was agendized, that we could have potentially a vice chair, Jason Barron, and a second vice chair, Barbara Broderick. And at the next meeting, we could put on the agenda whether we'd like to have a third vice chair. So we could take that action today and see, because, you know, the typing helped. And Kimber, your comment, does that reflect, what I just said, does that reflect, Kimber and Heather, what you would feel good about? And Jason, while Kimber's still typing, did you feel okay about that?
I do. I guess the question I might have for Emily is, if we have to come back and vote on this again, would it make sense to just come back with a recommendation next time and not take an action today? Or
That would be great, but this gets back to, if for some reason the chair's not, and I'm planning on being here, but if I'm not here, that gives us at least one step.
So we have to have a formal designation in order to run the meeting. You can't just designate someone to take over at the last second.
We should. Someone has to serve as chairman, and the board needs to elect who that person is, or second chairman. The way this was structured was that the chairman was chosen by the Board of Supervisors, so that's already been done. So at this point, there's no other designation. We can do it either way. We could table it until the next session, or vote and then have the other, you know, the potential for the other scenario. And I think we also just had one more comment.
Sure.
Kimber Lanning asked, I just wonder if we are capped at 9 total. And then Heather Carter wrote, I'm comfortable moving forward with a chair and vice chair, but do we need to add additional people? And those individuals could be considered as the second vice chair.
Okay.
As that second vice chair.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as question on the number total, that is how it's structured by the Board of Supervisors, and that was the action that the Board of Supervisors. Am I holding it? Oh, sorry. At this point, that is capped. That's not to say that this committee couldn't make a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors' consideration on the total number of individuals serving on the board.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
So, Mr. Chairman, with that, your plan sounds great to me. And certainly, if you are looking at the recommendation for next time, I'd support whatever meets the best needs of the committee.
Okay, thank you. With those comments, I would entertain a motion that Jason Barron be considered as the vice chair with a vote today, and that we would put this on the agenda for next time so that we've got options of a second vice chair, which Barb, we're going to take her hand being raised, could be a candidate, and whether we would want to do a third vice chair, or we might consider Brian. But for today, is there a motion to approve Jason Barron as the vice chair?
Mr. Chair, I so move that Jason will be considered the first vice chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
With that motion and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Kimber, I saw your hand. Heather, were you? Okay, great, thank you. The next agenda item, we did discuss public comments that will be very important in our future meetings. And this is my recollection. I'll tell you what I remember and then have it confirmed, is that we felt like for our first few meetings, it wasn't as critical to have this on the agenda, but it definitely would be in future meetings. And there might even be some meetings where it's a good portion of the meeting. Some of the government meetings that some of you have been part of, the public comments could be at the first, could be at the last. There could be a recommended standard amount of time. And so depending on how many comments there are, we would then have the ability to say whether it's 1 minute a person or 5 minutes, or it could be that it's just a standard. Someone has 2 minutes to speak, and if there's 60 people, then we just have to plan for that. So based on our last meeting, was that, from a recollection standpoint, I'm going to start with Brian, was that what you remember too?
Yeah, I think everyone expressed interest in really wanting to include public and get their input. We just wanted to have a discussion between the whole board to discuss what the best format is to receive those comments.
Sure. And before I open it up from a county perspective, where there are a lot of county meetings being held, was there any feedback from county leadership on recommendations or thoughts we should consider?
No, they are open to whatever you all want to do. One of the charges is to get and receive public comment and input. So I know they want to hear what the public has to say about this issue.
And Brian, as you are starting to see a vision of what I would call a cadence of topics, would you think that for our next meeting, we need to consider having public comments, or is it still a meeting or two away?
No, I think if we want to post it for public comment, we can. We'll go through the timeline a little later in the agenda, and we could potentially vote on it then, or we can vote on it now. The public can comment on our website at any time. And we'll also make an effort with these meetings to be live and to accept public comment that way as well, so they don't have to come down here and go through security.
Thank you. As Brian just noted, the next agenda item is going to be our discussion about a timeline. And if our committee is okay, why don't we move to that agenda item, have a better understanding of the timeline, then come back and talk about our public comments. Does that work? Okay, thank you. So Brian, to item number 4, the potential timeline for this committee, please.
I'm just pulling it up right now.
Kimber and Heather, I see a handout that we have here. Have you received it? Of an overall timeline?
Well, that's what I'm pulling up on the screen.
And Brian, you may have already known the answer. Did you send them a copy, or will you have it on the screen for them to see?
I will have it on the screen for
Okay,
them to see.
so I retract my question knowing that you do not have a copy.
Mm-mm. Thank you. All right. All right, here we go. So, Mr. Chair, last time you kind of asked for a brief overview or timeline of what we thought the committee might dive into while trying to execute the charge that the board set for this committee. So I kind of put together, or I kind of see it in 3 different segments in order to meet the deadline that we talked about so that the county is able to move forward with their recommendation. So first, March to May, want to build a strong foundation for you all. We want first to review the charge and then do a historic review of the 2 previous propositions and the funding that came from those. We thought it was important to have legal briefings on open meeting laws, public records, procurement, all those types of things. Have a budget briefing so you all know exactly what this money does and how the county uses it. Get a briefing from Maricopa County Attorney's Office to go over what they do and how it affects probation. Get in-depth briefings on adult probation and juvenile probation. And then also a review of the jail facilities. And then after that, I think you all will want to dive a little deeper into all these different subjects. And so we'll want to engage, you all may want to engage expert consultants and conduct a more in-depth analysis. And then after that, August to September, it would be developing recommendations, soliciting more public input as your recommendation gets a little more solid. And then create a draft plan and report, and then finally finalize the report and send it to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
So then,
Go on to the next slide too, and then we'll have some discussion.
so with those 3 different steps, we're still kind of in the foundation phase. So looking forward, we kind of talked about this time every other Thursday. We talked about 1 o'clock, it had to get adjusted. So we're aiming for these next meetings, but I know that we might have to make some adjustments. Specifically, the April 25th, we have a couple conflicts. So I'll reach out to you all about dates that might work that week that we can all meet. But so for the April 11th meeting, we go through the statutory framework that funds public safety facilities, what's allowed under the law, review Prop 400, 411, and then do a historic overview of the expenditures and see where the money has gone over the years, and then also have the county attorney give a presentation. And that sets up our April 25th meeting, which we would dedicate to adult and juvenile probation. What they do is directly impacted by what MCAO does. And then May 9th, talk about jail facilities and the jail master plan. They'll give a brief overview, and they are also working on finalizing an updated jail master plan that we'll get later in June.
Thank you. And to Heather and Kimber and Barb, I just want to find out yet whether we can hear you. Has there been any progress on that yet? Okay, so we can't hear you yet. And Heather, I'm going to work on my sign language, but I think I'll make this comment for those who were not here last time, Marisa and Heather, that we did not get into too much detail about I'll call it a cadence of meetings, but we did get some feedback. And some of that feedback also came from interaction we've had with Brian. And so talking to Brian this week, it seems like we are feeling that we could go every 2 weeks. And Thursday, this is a very busy group, but Thursday, if we get on our calendars, would work. One question, the 1 o'clock versus, I had in my notes 1:30 if people had lunch. So let me just ask as we tie this together, is 1 o'clock a good time, or was 1:30 the time? 1:30, Brian?
Mr. Chair, 1:30 is better for me.
1:30 for me too, Mr. Chair.
So Heather and Kimber and Barb, does 1:30 work for the three of you? We'll do thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay. There was a thumbs up for Barb. Kimber is kind of either one. All right, I'll take that as a thumbs up. And Heather? Kind of, it just depends. Is that what that sign language means?
Yeah, she typed in response. Her admin set meet conflicts. She has a few conflicts, but supports 1:30.
Okay, thank you. And the other part of our conversation was, it might be easy to say, we meet in person, we meet by Zoom, we meet in person, so, and do that. And that would help these busy schedules, but we did have some feeling that this is so important, maybe we do need to be here. And so that's open for discussion too. And I think the thought was, if we did, for those who could meet here, the Zoom option would always be open, and that you would let us know if there were certain meetings that it would be helpful to be here in person. So any discussion on that? Well, as I say that, let me ask Brian, what is proposed for April 11th? And we'll come back and ask you a question about the conflicts on the 25th, but for the 11th, the 25th, and the 9th, the topics, are those meetings that if we could be here in person, it would be helpful? Or would one of those meetings be potential to do all on Zoom? Do you have any feedback on that?
I think any of these, any of the topics we have moving forward, we could do over Zoom. I don't think any of these necessarily need to be in person, but I know the probation, the April 25th, the adult and juvenile probation is a pretty important meeting, since it is a big chunk of this funding. And then facilities, they're going to give kind of just a brief overview while they're finalizing the master plan. So I don't know that that necessarily needs to be in person, but we can always have the option of having the room open, okay, but also letting people participate online. And then Kimber did say, I can at least make some of the meetings, but maybe late or leave early for standing conflicts.
Okay, thank you, Kimber. And I think when we first were doing the feedback, we could tell that all 9 of us merging together, it's going to be a challenge to find the perfect ideal time, but thank you for your willingness to do that. And there was also a comment last meeting that some of our meetings we might go somewhere, but the April 11th, 25th, May 9th, we would be meeting either in this room or by Zoom. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think going out and getting public input later on, I think that's when you all have a better idea of the recommendations that you want to make to the board. And so we can set up meetings out in the community where you guys can hear from the public in person, but also they can also participate online.
Thank you. You also mentioned that there were some conflicts on April 25th. Tell us more about that.
There's a couple members that already indicated that April 25th isn't an ideal date to meet. So I can follow up with you all on another day that week that works, offline.
Was for those who did give feedback, and I know I was one that I'll be out of town and possibly could do Zoom, was it that date or was it the entire week?
I have to look back specifically. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Do we want to have any discussion about April 25th together right now? Or do you want to do that offline? Will that help for Brian just to contact us?
I'm good, April 25th.
And Mr. Chair, I had indicated to Brian that I will be out of town, but I can come by Zoom if that, to make sure there's a quorum, I can commit to that.
And Brian, where I wasn't sure of the timeline, I think I could also join by Zoom.
Okay, all right. So 1:30 on the 25th?
And should we, for planning purposes right now, just assume that's all Zoom? Does that,
Sure.
okay.
And Heather Carter did say, same in drive time and parking time makes the schedule most challenging. When it's online, it's easier to manage other meetings. In-person adds at least an extra hour block on my calendar. I have 3 overlapping meetings, 2 with the county and 1 internal
Okay.
on the 25th.
So just taking Heather's comments, the 25th, if we do it by Zoom, that would work for you, Heather?
No, she's on the county's workforce board, so I don't believe that time works for her.
Okay, so the 25th is not good for Heather.
She said, I need to confirm that the county workforce board isn't meeting. I'll follow up
Okay.
offline
So
with Heather. And
today, tentatively, we'll keep the 25th, but we'll make it a Zoom meeting. And Heather, what I heard you say is, as we continue to try and develop a cadence, that you might be in favor of every other meeting, 1 in person, 1 on Zoom. And I know, Brian, I remembered your willingness to come because of the importance, but maybe we could try that, see how it's working, if in-person needs to be, may have a higher priority, or if Brian says this is a meeting where it would be important to be together, we could look at that too. But, what I just said is a little bit fuzzy, but I think in summary, what I would say is we might still plan on meeting in person on the 11th for those who could, and those who couldn't would have Zoom. April 25th would definitely be all Zoom. May 9th would be the in-person for those who couldn't Zoom. And then maybe the May 23rd would be back to Zoom, and we'll just see how it goes at that point. Does that work? Okay.
And to, just with the timeline that we're talking about now, once we get through this like foundational learning kind of step, we might reevaluate. We might have time where we're having consultants review things, but for now, I think this seems to work for everyone.
And summarizing what I just said to myself, next meeting, still meet in person with the option to join by Zoom, then Zoom, and then meet in person, and then Zoom, at least the next 4, tentatively.
Yes.
Okay. And we don't need to vote on that. That's more of an administrative item working with Brian. Okay. So looking at the timeline that is proposed, any discussion or comments or questions any of you would like to ask Brian?
I have a question. So as I was listening, I thought the stress of being in person during the adult probation and juvenile probation was stated. But if we're saying that that's going to be Zoom, can we reevaluate that as we get closer?
Yes, and these topics aren't necessarily set in stone. I was just trying to lay something out. So if we wanted to move probation to a different day, like the 9th, we could do that as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And that causes me to ask a question. Is that correct that the probation discussion would be better for in person?
I think so.
Okay. And
I think so.
okay. So should we be giving Brian direction right now to maybe flip-flop the May 9th and May 25th?
It sounds like what would make sense would be to have the probation meeting on a plate when we were here in person. And since the jail meeting is really just a preliminary until they get their plan, why don't we just flip the dates for those two?
I will do that.
Okay, Brian, we'll let you take that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
And with that tentative, at least for the next 3 meetings, this is back to agenda item number 3, the public comment discussion. Brian, I'm going to start with you because you are our inside consultant on that April 11th as we continue to come up to speed and learn as a committee. Would that be a date that we should consider public comments or keep working as a committee to come up to speed?
I think it's definitely a day that we could try the virtual public comment portion. I just have to work with IT on setting up a solution that works for public and you all. So that's.
So to our committee, you've been in government meetings. There are many options. And on the virtual side, if the county has a meeting right now, do they have, so I could call in and I would be talking on the phone or through the computer. Is that how I would do it? It's not typed, or is it also typed? Is that an option?
You do all three. Audio by phone, audio over as part of the meeting, and type.
Okay. To our committee members who may not have heard that, the feedback we just received, with that potential setup, that would be all options. It could be typed, it could be audio, calling in on the computer. So I'm willing to try it, see how it goes. But back to my question, when we do it today in county meetings, how long does someone have? The written part is easy. But if someone were calling in, do we say, you've got 2 minutes, or what's normal?
You can set
Okay. Any feedback on how long, if we try this out? Brian?
I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that we try and be consistent with maybe what the Board of Supervisors does and see if that works.
Okay, and that is 2
Existing
minutes, is that
policy,
right?
2 minutes.
Okay. Okay, Brian, any other comments? To this, Brian, does that give you feedback to put that as an agenda item?
Yep.
Okay. Now, what a pleasure to have a vice chair and other potential vice chairs coming up. Jason is a quality advisor for just a minute. That may have covered the 4 agenda items before we would move to executive session. Do you have anything else that you think we missed or more discussion to have as a quality advisor for a moment?
I do not.
Okay. To the rest of the committee, before we would move into executive session, any other comments, or to those who are typing in online? And I might just ask this question. In executive session, we move to another room. Will we be able to still have the 3 in a position to type if need be in the other room, or should we try and stay here? So, okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn this main committee meeting and move to executive session, then we'll come back. Oh, we won't come back. We adjourn for the day. Thank you for all who are here participating, and we'll continue the discussion in public on April 11th.
And Heather, Barbara, and Kimber, if you could join the executive session link now.